The command ship Valiant served as Jake's mobile headquarters as the combined human and Zephyrian fleets moved toward the rim worlds where the Harbinger fleet had been attacking. Princess Lyra worked beside him in the command center, coordinating evacuation efforts while Jake planned defensive strategies. The first battle came sooner than expected when Harbinger ships attacked the colony world of New Geneva while the evacuation was still in progress. Jake found himself back in his element, commanding multiple fleets and making split-second decisions that would determine who lived and who died. All ships move to defensive formation beta, Jake ordered through the communication system. Priority is protecting the civilian transports. Do not engage the enemy directly until all non-combatants are clear. Princess Lyra coordinated with the planetary government to speed up the evacuation while monitoring casualty reports. She watched Jake work and saw how the weight of command settled on his shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome coat. The Harbinger ships used weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics and tactics that made no logical sense. Jake had to adapt his strategies in real time as his opponents displayed capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. "They're not trying to win territory," Jake told his staff officers during a brief break between attacks. "They're trying to cause maximum suffering with minimum strategic gain. This isn't conquest, it's something else entirely." Captain Troy Mitchell, Jake's oldest friend and most trusted advisor, arrived with reinforcements from Earth Defense Command. He had served with Jake through every major conflict and understood better than anyone how the war had changed him. "You look different," Mitchell told Jake during a private moment between battles. "More like the person you used to be before everything went wrong." Jake glanced toward Princess Lyra, who was working with refugee coordinators in the next room. "Having someone to fight for changes things. Before I was fighting because it was my duty. Now I'm fighting to protect something that matters to me." The turning point came when the Harbinger fleet attacked Nexus Station itself. Jake realized that his old home was in danger and felt a personal stake in the battle that went beyond military objectives. This was where he had found peace, and where Lyra had found him. "All ships converge on Nexus Station," Jake ordered as he reviewed the tactical situation. "We end this here and now." The battle for Nexus Station lasted 18 hours, and became one of the largest space engagements in galactic history. Jake commanded over 200 ships from 6 different species, while Princess Lyra managed the evacuation of over 5,000 civilians from the station. During the height of the battle, Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of destroying the Harbinger command ship, he ordered his forces to disable it and attempt communication with its crew. "Sir, they've been attacking innocent civilians," Colonel Phillips said over the communications channel. "Why are we trying to talk to them?" "Because something about their tactics doesn't make sense," Jake replied while studying the enemy ship's movements. "They're fighting like they're desperate, not conquest-driven." When communication was finally established with the Harbinger command ship, Jake discovered that they were refugees themselves. Their homeworlds had been destroyed by an ancient automated defense system, and they had been fleeing across the galaxy for generations, trying to find a new place to live. "We attack because we have no choice," the Harbinger commander explained, through the translation system. "Your species have homes and futures. We have only ships, and the memory of worlds that no longer exist." Princess Lyra was the first to suggest a peaceful solution. "What if we helped them find uninhabited worlds where they could settle?" she asked during the emergency diplomatic conference. "Fighting them only creates more refugees." Emperor Thexron supported his daughter's proposal and offered Zephyrian territory that was suitable for colonization. Earth Command initially resisted, but Jake's recommendation carried enough weight to change their minds. The Ghost of Andromeda says we should try diplomacy instead of warfare, Admiral Sullivan told the Joint Council. Given his track record, I think we should listen. The peace negotiations took place on Nexus Station with Jake and Princess Lyra serving as the primary mediators. Jake's military reputation gave him credibility with the human forces, while Lyra's diplomatic training helped her communicate with the refugee fleet. "You could have destroyed us," the Harbinger commander told Jake during one of their private meetings. "Your military advantages were overwhelming. Why did you choose mercy instead?" Jake looked out at Jake and Princess Lyra walked in silence through the corridors of Nexus Station until they reached a quiet observation deck that looked out at the stars. Jake could feel the princess studying him as they walked, but he was not ready to meet her eyes yet. Everything had changed in the span of a few minutes, and he was not sure how to handle it. "So you're really him," Lyra said quietly once they were alone. "The Ghost of Andromeda, the hero of 1,000 battles." Jake leaned against the window and stared out at the ships moving around the station. "I'm the same person I was this morning, Princess. The only thing that changed is now you know my real job history." Lyra moved to stand beside him at the window. "Your real job history includes saving entire worlds and defeating alien armadas that threaten to destroy everything in their path. That's not exactly the same as fixing engines. Those battles happened because I made decisions that got a lot of good people killed," Jake said without looking at her. "The history books don't talk much about the cost of all those victories." Princess Lyra could hear the pain in his voice and began to understand why he had been hiding on Nexus Station. "Is that why you disappeared?" she asked gently. "Because you couldn't handle being called a hero?" Jake was quiet for a long time before answering. "I couldn't handle making decisions that determined who lived and who died. Every strategy I created, every battle plan I approved, meant that some people would go home to their families, and others wouldn't. After 15 years of war, I just couldn't carry that weight anymore." News of Jake's identity spread through Nexus Station faster than a plasma fire. Within hours, reporters from across the galaxy were requesting docking permits and trying to get interviews with the legendary war hero. Station Administrator Ryan Cole was overwhelmed trying to manage the media circus while keeping normal operations running. Emperor Thexeron Vexthara arrived on his personal flagship, accompanied by half the Zephyrian royal fleet. He had come to assess whether his daughter's relationship with the famous human could benefit the Empire or if it would cause more problems than it was worth. The Emperor was a massive figure even by Zephyrian standards, and his presence made everyone around him nervous. He had ruled the Zephyrian Empire for over 200 years and was known for making decisions that affected entire sectors of the galaxy. Colonel Amy Phillips arrived with a full military escort carrying Jake's complete service records. The files contained details of 1,247 confirmed battles, 15 major wars that ended with his involvement, and strategic decisions that had saved over 200 million lives across human space. "The numbers don't tell the whole story," Phillips explained to the assembled diplomats and reporters. "Colonel Murphy didn't just win battles. He found ways to end conflicts with minimal casualties on both sides. His strategies often turned enemies into allies. Dr. Carter was monitoring Jake's psychological state through remote sensors built into his clothing. The readings showed extreme stress levels that threatened to trigger a complete breakdown. Jake was being forced back into the spotlight. He had desperately tried to escape, and his mind was struggling to cope. Princess Lyra found Jake sitting alone in his small quarters, staring at the wall. His hands were shaking and his breathing was irregular. She had never seen anyone look so trapped and desperate. "Jake," she said softly while sitting down beside him. "Are you all right?" "I can't do this again, Lyra," he said, using her name without the royal title for the first time. "I can't be Colonel Murphy anymore. That person destroyed everything he touched." Lyra took his shaking hands in hers and was surprised by how cold they were. "The person I met in the workshop wasn't a destroyer. He was kind and patient and treated me like I mattered." "That person was fake," Jake said while pulling his hands away. "Jake Murphy, the mechanic, was just a lie I told myself so I could pretend the war never happened." Lyra felt angry at seeing Jake blame himself for things that were beyond his control. "The war would have happened with or without you. The only difference is that more people would have died if you hadn't been there to save them." Emperor Thexeron requested a private meeting with Jake to discuss the political implications of his relationship with Princess Lyra. The meeting took place in the station's most secure conference room, with only a few trusted advisors present. "Colonel Murphy," the Emperor said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, "your reputation precedes you. I am curious about your intentions regarding my daughter." Jake looked at the massive alien ruler and felt the familiar weight of political responsibility settling on his shoulders again. "Your Majesty, I have no political intentions. I care about Princess Lyra as a person, not as a way to gain power or influence." The Emperor studied Jake, carefully looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. "Many people would see marriage to my daughter as an opportunity to advance their own interests. Why should I believe you are different? Because I've already had power, Your Majesty," Jake replied honestly. "I commanded fleets that could destroy entire star systems and made decisions that shaped the fate of civilizations. I gave all that up because I wanted a simple life away from politics and warfare." Back in his quarters, Jake was reviewing classified reports about a new threat called the Harbinger fleet that had been attacking colonies on the Galactic Rim. General Stone and Admiral Sullivan wanted him to take command of the defense forces, but Jake was reluctant to return to military service. Princess Lyra entered his quarters without knocking and found him studying tactical displays and fleet movements. For the first time since she had known him, Jake looked like the legendary military commander the galaxy feared and respected. "You're going back, aren't you?" she said, while looking at the battle plans spread across his desk. Jake looked up at her, and she could see the internal struggle in his eyes. "People are dying, Lyra. The Harbinger fleet is using weapons and tactics nobody has seen before. If I don't help stop them, entire worlds could be destroyed." Lyra sat down across from him and studied the tactical information he had been reviewing. The reports showed a pattern of attacks that made no strategic sense but caused maximum civilian casualties. "What if I came with you?" she said suddenly. "My diplomatic training might be useful, and I know something about coordinating civilian evacuations." Jake stared at her in surprise. "Lyra, this isn't a political mission. People are going to die, and I might not be able to protect you." "I'm not asking you to protect me, Jake," she replied firmly. "I'm asking you to let me help you save people." Emperor Thexeron made his decision after consulting with his advisors and reviewing intelligence reports about the Harbinger fleet. He announced that the Zephyrian Empire would support any mission led by Colonel Murphy, and that Princess Lyra would serve as an official diplomatic liaison. Prince Kale was horrified by his father's decision and tried to argue that sending Lyra into a war zone was too dangerous. The Emperor silenced his objections with a look that could melt armor plating. "Your sister has chosen her path," the Emperor told his son. "She will either prove herself worthy of royal blood or she will die trying. Either outcome is acceptable." Jake spent his last night on Nexus Station walking through the lower decks where he had found peace for 3 years. Tomorrow he would become Colonel Murphy again and return to the world of military strategy and life-or-death decisions. Princess Lyra found him in his old workshop looking at the tools he would be leaving behind. She understood that this place represented the only happiness he had known since the war ended. "Are you ready?" she asked while taking his hand. Jake squeezed her fingers gently and looked into her golden eyes. "I'm scared, Lyra. Not of dying, but of becoming the person I used to be. What if saving people turns me back into a monster?" Lyra kissed his cheek softly and smiled at him with complete confidence. "Then I'll be there to remind you who you really are." The arrival of the Zephyrian Royal Fleet changed everything on Nexus Station. 5 massive warships appeared in the station's space and demanded immediate docking privileges. Princess Lyra watched from the observation deck as her brother's flagship moved into position with military precision. Prince Kale Vex Thara was everything Lyra was not. Where she was curious and playful, he was serious and duty-focused. He had come to bring her home and end what he saw as an embarrassing situation that was making their family look foolish across the galaxy. Jake was working on a transport engine when Captain Brooks found him in the workshop. She looked worried and kept checking over her shoulder like she expected someone to follow her. "Jake, we need to talk," she said, while moving closer to where he was working. "The Zephyrian Prince is asking questions about you, and I don't think our cover story is going to hold up much longer." Jake set down his tools and looked at her with the same calm expression he always wore. "What kind of questions?" "He wants to know why his sister is spending so much time with a human mechanic," Brooks replied while nervously adjusting her uniform. "He thinks you might be trying to take advantage of her for political gain." "And what did you tell him?" Jake asked while wiping grease from his hands. "That you're just a regular maintenance worker who keeps to himself," Brooks said. "But he's not buying it. He's ordered a full background check on everyone who has had contact with Princess Lyra." Jake nodded like this was just another problem to solve, rather than a potential disaster. "How long do we have before he figures out who I really am?" "Maybe a few hours if we're lucky," Brooks replied. "Jake, if your identity gets exposed, it's going to cause problems for everyone. Earth Command is already sending Admiral Sullivan to handle the situation." Before Jake could respond, Princess Lyra appeared in the workshop doorway. She looked upset, and her usual cheerful mood was nowhere to be seen. "Jake, my brother wants to meet you," she said while walking toward them. "He's demanding that I bring you to the diplomatic quarters right now." Jake looked at Captain Brooks, who seemed ready to panic. Then he looked back at Princess Lyra and saw the worry in her golden eyes. "All right, Princess," he said while putting on a clean shirt over his work clothes. "Let's go meet your brother." The diplomatic quarters were much fancier than the lower decks where Jake spent his time. The walls were covered with expensive art from different worlds, and the furniture looked like it cost more than most people made in a year. Jake felt out of place, but he kept his expression neutral as they walked through the corridors. Prince Kale was waiting for them in a large meeting room surrounded by Zephyrian guards and human diplomats. He was taller than his sister, and his blue skin had darker markings that showed his royal bloodline. His golden eyes studied Jake like he was examining a piece of broken machinery. "So this is the human who thinks he can marry into the royal family," Prince Kale said in a voice that could freeze water. "Tell me, human, what makes you think you are worthy of my sister?" Jake looked around the room at all the important people staring at him. He could feel their judgment and their assumption that he was just some nobody trying to climb above his station. For a moment, the old anger started to rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. I don't think I'm worthy of anything, Your Highness, Jake replied in a respectful tone. Your sister asked me to marry her, and I said yes. That's all there is to it. Prince. Kale's expression darkened at Jake's simple answer. You expect me to believe that a common mechanic would casually agree to marry alien royalty without any ulterior motives? I expect you to believe what your sister tells you, Jake said while meeting the prince's angry stare. She knows me better than you do. The prince stepped closer to Jake until they were almost face to face. Listen carefully, human. My sister may find your primitive culture amusing, but that does not mean you have any real value. You are nothing more than a grease monkey who will be forgotten as soon as she returns home. Jake felt something shift inside him at those words. Not anger at the insult to himself, but at the threat implied toward Princess Lyra and the other humans on the station. His posture straightened, and his voice took on a tone that made several people in the room step backward. Your Highness, Jake said in a voice that carried authority most people had never heard from him. I suggest you be very careful about threatening the safety and security of anyone on this station. Prince Kale was surprised by the sudden change in Jake's demeanor. The humble mechanic had been replaced by someone who radiated dangerous competence. Before the prince could respond, the meeting room doors opened and General Marcus Stone walked in wearing a full-dress uniform. Colonel Murphy, General Stone said while saluting Jake with military precision. It's good to see you again, sir. Every person in the room froze as they tried to process what they had just heard. Princess Lyra stared at Jake in shock, while Prince Kale's face went through several different expressions. General Stone, Jake replied, while returning the salute out of habit. I thought I told you I was retired. You did, sir, but current events have made your return to active duty necessary, General Stone said while handing Jake a data pad. Admiral Sullivan sends her regards and requests your immediate assistance with a classified matter. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, stepped forward with a look of recognition on her face. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Colonel Jake Murphy, also known as the Ghost of Andromeda. Hero of the Centauri campaign, defender of Earth during the Void War, and the most decorated soldier in human military history. The silence in the room was complete as everyone tried to understand what they had just learned. Princess Lyra felt her knees go weak as she realized that her joke marriage proposal had connected her to the most famous human warrior in the galaxy. Prince Kale's face had gone pale as he processed the implications of what he had just said too. One of the most dangerous men alive. Stories of Jake Murphy's military achievements were known throughout the galaxy, and many alien races still feared the mention of his name. Jake looked around the room at all the shocked faces and felt the familiar weight of his reputation settling on his shoulders again. He had hoped to leave Colonel Murphy behind forever, but it seemed his past would never let him go. Princess Lyra, he said while turning to face her directly, I think we need to talk. General Stone handed Jake another data pad with updated military reports. Sir, I'm afraid there's no time for personal conversations. We have a situation developing on the rim worlds that requires your immediate attention. Jake took the reports but kept his eyes on Princess Lyra, who was still staring at him like she was seeing him for the first time. He realized that everything between them was about to change, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Give me 10 minutes, General, Jake said while moving toward the door. Then we can discuss whatever crisis needs my attention. As Jake left the room with Princess Lyra following behind him, Prince Kyle finally found his voice again. Did I just threaten the ghost of Andromeda? He asked nobody in particular. Ambassador Rodriguez nodded grimly. Yes, Your Highness, you did. I suggest you start composing a very sincere apology. Princess Lyra spent the next 3 days visiting Jake in his workshop every chance she got. She told her guards she was learning about human technology, but really she just enjoyed talking to someone who treated her like a normal person. Jake answered her questions about engines and space travel while he worked and never seemed bothered by her constant presence. During their conversations, Lyra started noticing things about Jake that seemed odd for a simple mechanic. When a heavy piece of machinery fell near them, Jake moved faster than anyone she had ever seen and caught it before it could hit the ground. His reflexes were so quick it looked almost impossible. She also noticed scars on his hands and arms when his sleeves rolled up while he worked. The marks looked like they came from weapons or explosions rather than workshop accidents. When she asked about them, Jake just said he had worked on military ships before coming to Nexus Station. One afternoon, while Jake was replacing power cables. In her ship, Lyra suggested they should have some kind of engagement ceremony since they were supposed to be getting married. She expected him to laugh or remind her that the whole thing started as a joke, but instead Jake looked thoughtful. "If that's what you want, we can do it," he said, while connecting 2 cables together. "Though I don't know much about Zephyrian wedding customs." Lyra realized that Jake was taking their fake engagement more seriously than she had expected. Part of her found this concerning, but another part was strangely pleased that he seemed to care about making her happy. "We could just have a simple ceremony," she said while watching him work. "Nothing too formal." Jake nodded and went back to his repairs. "Whatever makes you comfortable, Princess." The way he said her title was different from how other people said it. Most people used her rank to show respect or fear, but Jake said it like it was just her name. She was starting to understand that this human saw her as Lyra first and a princess second. Captain Lisa Brooks received another encrypted message from Earth Command that made her stomach twist with worry. Admiral Kate Sullivan wanted a full report on Jake's activities and mental state. The message also included orders to keep his identity secret using any means necessary. Lisa had served with Jake during the last war and knew what he had been through. She also knew that he had chosen to disappear because he could not handle being treated like a hero anymore. If his secret came out now, it would destroy the quiet life he had built for himself. She decided to visit Dr. Ben Carter in the medical bay to discuss Jake's situation. Carter had been treating Jake's psychological problems for 2 years and understood better than anyone how fragile Jake's mental state really was. "He's been doing better lately," Carter told her while reviewing Jake's medical files. "The nightmares have decreased and he seems more relaxed than usual. But if his identity gets exposed, I'm worried about what might happen." Lisa nodded because she had seen what fame and responsibility had done to Jake during the war. "We need to make sure nobody finds out who he really is." "That might be harder than you think," Carter said while pointing to a news report on his computer screen. "The Zephyrian princess has been spending a lot of time with him and people are starting to talk." Lisa read the report about Princess Lyra's extended stay on the station and her frequent visits to the lower decks. If reporters started investigating, they might discover Jake's true identity by accident. Meanwhile, in his small quarters, Jake was having trouble sleeping again. The nightmares had started coming back more often since Princess Lyra arrived. Not because of her, but because being around other people reminded him of all the people he had failed to save during his years of military service. He got up and walked to his small window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were the battlefields where he had made decisions that saved millions of lives but cost thousands of others. The weight of those choices never left him alone for very long. Jake took his medication and tried to push the memories away. Dr. Carter had taught him techniques for managing the guilt and trauma, but some nights nothing seemed to help. He thought about Princess Lyra and how easy it was to talk to her about simple things like engines and repairs instead of war and strategy. The next morning, Lyra arrived at the workshop earlier than usual and found Jake already working on a different ship. She noticed he looked tired and his hands shook slightly while he handled his tools. "Are you feeling well, Jake?" she asked while moving closer to get a better look at him. "Just didn't sleep much," he replied without looking up from his work. "Sometimes the station gets noisy at night." Lyra knew he was not telling her the complete truth, but she did not want to push him for information he was not ready to share. Instead, she sat down nearby and started asking questions about the ship he was repairing. As they talked, Jake began to relax and his hands stopped shaking. Lyra realized that her presence seemed to calm him down in some way she did not fully understand. This made her feel protective of him, which was a new experience for someone who had always been the one being protected. "Jake, can I ask you something personal?" she said, after they had been talking for about an hour. "Sure, Princess." "Why did you agree to marry me so easily?" she asked, while studying his face for clues. "Most people would think I was crazy or trying to trick them." Jake stopped working and looked at her with those calm blue eyes that always seemed to see more than they let on. "Because you asked like you actually wanted an answer instead of just trying to shock me. And because you've been coming down here every day to talk to me like I'm worth your time." His answer surprised her because it was more honest than she had expected. She realized that Jake had agreed to her proposal not because he was confused or overwhelmed, but because he genuinely liked spending time with her. "Do you think we could actually make it work?" she asked quietly. "A human and a Zephyrian, I mean." Jake considered her question carefully before answering. "I think two people can make anything work if they want it enough, and they're honest with each other." Lyra felt something warm spread through her chest at his words. What had started as a playful joke was becoming something real, and that both excited and scared her. Dr. Carter was reviewing Jake's psychological profile when he noticed something interesting in the recent reports. Jake's stress levels had actually decreased since Princess Lyra started visiting him regularly. Social interaction usually made Jake more anxious, but this alien princess seemed to have the opposite effect. Carter made a note to monitor the situation carefully. If Princess Lyra was helping Jake's recovery, then her presence might be beneficial. But if her royal status attracted too much attention, it could undo years of progress. Princess Lyra was walking back to her quarters when she decided to do some research about human military history. She wanted to understand more about the scars on Jake's arms and the haunted look that sometimes appeared in his eyes when he thought nobody was watching. She accessed the station's database and began reading about Earth's recent conflicts. What she found made her realize that Jake's past was probably much more complicated than he had told her. Jake Murphy wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag as he looked at the broken engine in front of him. The massive starship engine was twice his size and covered in alien symbols he could not read. He had been working on Nexus Station for 3 years now and had seen engines from every corner of the galaxy. This one belonged to a Zephyrian royal transport that had limped into the station with power problems. The lower decks of Nexus Station were always busy with mechanics and workers fixing ships that came and went every day. Jake liked it down here because nobody bothered him much. He could work in peace and nobody asked too many questions about his past. The pay was decent and the work kept his hands busy, which helped him sleep better at night. He heard footsteps, behind him and turned to see a tall figure in expensive robes walking toward him. The alien had blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light, and golden eyes that looked curious about everything around her. Jake had never seen a Zephyrian up close before, but he knew from the fancy clothes and the way she carried herself that this was someone important. Princess Lyra Vexthara had grown tired of waiting in the diplomatic quarters while her transport was being repaired. Her guards had told her to stay put, but she never listened to such boring advice. She wanted to see how these humans worked and maybe have some fun while she waited. The lower decks smelled like oil and metal, but they were much more interesting than the stuffy upper levels where all the diplomats spent their time. She watched the human mechanic work for a few minutes without saying anything. He moved with steady hands and seemed to know exactly what he was doing, even though her ship's engine was completely different from human technology. Most people became nervous when they saw her royal robes, but this man just kept working as if she was not even there. Jake finally looked up at her and wiped more grease from his forehead. His dark hair was messy, and his work clothes were stained with oil, but his blue eyes were clear and calm. He did not bow or act scared like most people did around royalty. Instead, he just nodded at her like she was any other person. "Can I help you with something?" Jake asked in a voice that sounded tired, but not unfriendly. Lyra smiled because his casual attitude amused her. Back home on Zephyria, everyone treated her like she might break if they spoke too loudly. This human talked to her like she was just another person walking through his workshop. "I am Princess Lyra Vexthara, and that is my ship you are fixing," she said while pointing at the engine. "I wanted to see how humans work." Jake looked at the engine and then back at her. "Well, your engine had a power coupling failure and 2 burned-out plasma converters. Should be ready in about 4 hours if I can find the right parts." The princess moved closer to get a better look at what he was doing. She had never seen anyone work with their hands like this before. On her home world, machines did most of the repair work, and people just told them what to do. But this human was taking apart complex machinery with simple tools and seemed to understand every piece. "What is your name, human?" she asked while watching. "Him remove a damaged component." "Jake Murphy," he answered without looking up from his work. Lyra found his lack of ceremony refreshing. At home, people called her "Your Royal Highness" and bowed every time they spoke to her. This Jake person treated her like she was just another customer asking about her ship. "Do you know who I am, Jake Murphy?" she asked with a playful smile. Jake glanced at her expensive robes and jewelry. "Some kind of important person, I guess. But down here, everybody's ship gets fixed the same way whether they're rich or poor." This made Lyra laugh out loud. She had never met anyone who cared so little about her status. Most people either feared her or tried to impress her, but Jake just wanted to fix her engine and get back to work. An idea formed in her mind that was so amusing she could not resist trying it. Royal life was full of boring ceremonies and stuffy protocols, but this human offered something completely different. She decided to test just how casual he really was. "Jake Murphy, I have a proposition for you," she said, while trying not to smile too much. Jake put down his tools and looked at her with raised eyebrows. "What kind of proposition?" "Marry me," she said, in the most serious voice she could manage. Jake stared at her for a long moment without saying anything. Lyra expected him to stammer and make excuses and maybe run away like most people would when faced with such an impossible situation. Instead, he just shrugged his shoulders and went back to working on the engine. "Sure, why not?" he said while installing a new component. "But I warn you, I snore, and I'm not much of a dancer." Lyra's mouth fell open in surprise. She had expected any reaction except casual acceptance. This human had just agreed to marry an alien princess, like she had asked him to pass her a wrench. "You are serious?" she asked, while staring at him in disbelief. Jake looked up at her again with those calm blue eyes. "You asked, and I answered. Was it supposed to be a joke?" The princess realized that her joke had just turned into something much more interesting. This human was either completely insane or the most unusual person she had ever met. Either way, she found herself wanting to know more about him. Most people would be terrified to marry someone they just met, she said while sitting down on a nearby crate to get more comfortable. "Most people worry too much about things they can't control," Jake replied, while continuing his work. "Besides, you seem nice enough, and I bet being married to a princess comes with decent health benefits." Lyra laughed again, because she had never heard anyone describe marriage to royalty in terms of health benefits. This Jake Murphy was definitely not like anyone she had ever met before. She decided to extend her stay on Nexus Station to learn more about this strange human who treated marriage proposals like casual business arrangements. Her guards would not be happy, but she was having too much fun to care about their concerns. Captain Lisa Brooks watched the security monitors from her office in the upper levels of the station. She had noticed the Zephyrian princess talking with someone in the lower decks and decided to check who it was. When she saw Jake Murphy on the screen, her blood went cold. She immediately started typing an encrypted message to Earth Command. If Jake's identity was discovered, it could cause problems that went far beyond simple diplomatic incidents. She had to make sure his secret stayed safe no matter what it took. Down in the workshop, Jake continued fixing the royal engine, while Princess Lyra asked him questions about human culture and life on Nexus Station. Neither of them knew that this casual meeting would soon change both their lives in ways they could never imagine.